Do you believe in free speech?
Yes.
Do you believe that people should be judged by their character, not their skin color?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe in freedom of religion?
Yep. Who wouldn't say yes to all of these?
If you believe these things, you're probably not a progressive.
Okay, make a note of what he says here. He basically says progressivism doesn't stand for freedom of speech or freedom of religion or equal treatment of people by race. Just keep that in mind.
You might think you're a progressive. I used to think I was.
You might think you're a classical liberal, Dave. I used to think I was too. But I'm the one who decides the criteria for individually defined political labels that are chosen by the people they represent and not the people they oppose. You're not a real classical liberal because I said so.
In short, who wouldn't want to be a progressive? But over the last couple of years, the meaning of the word progressive has changed. Progressives used to say, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
So you're saying that because of a certain group of progressives no longer believing in free speech, nobody else should identify as progressives? Is that what you're getting at? Because that doesn't make any sense. Why would you completely ditch your label because there are certain people you disagree with who also use that label? And it's not like you're even gonna get an accurate representation of those people anyway. All you do is focus on the regressive left, so every observation you make of them is gonna be riddled with selection bias. So it's completely pointless to make a decision based on an observation you make of your opponents like that.
Banning speakers whose opinions you don't agree with from college campuses, that's not progressive.
That's completely true, it isn't progressive.
Prohibiting any words not approved of as politically correct, that's not progressive.
This one is difficult because the exact phrasing they use makes it technically correct, but the thing they're describing doesn't actually happen very often at all. The behavior that is much more common, and the one that gets criticized much more often, isn't prohibiting any words not approved of, it's choosing not to use any words not approved of. There's an important distinction there, and mixing them up can be misleading when you're trying to preach about censorship and free speech and authoritarianism. One of them is controlling someone else's speech in a public setting, or a setting in which free speech should be recognized and exercised and celebrated, such as a college campus. But the other one is an individual or private institution making a choice to exclude less people. You see the difference? Now say what you want about politically correct speech, but regardless of your opinion on it, you still have to agree that it's covered under free speech. So an individual or an institution making that choice by themselves to use more restricted speech is completely fine. But the moment they enforce that decision on other people and take that freedom away from other people is the moment when it becomes a problem. That's something completely different, and that is regressive. And that is the thing you should be arguing against, not prohibiting any words not approved of, because that doesn't really happen.
Putting trigger warnings on books, movies, music, anything that might offend people, that's not progressive either.
Well, you're right, it's not progressive, but it's also not regressive or anything. It's actually completely apolitical. Again, this is just a private institution doing what they think is best to make more money. It's pretty simple. When people are more comfortable buying your product or service, they're more likely to buy your product or service. It's not a political statement to try to avoid controversy. You know the MPAA system for movies? That's just a giant system for trigger warnings. G, PG, PG-13, R. You know the ESRB, or PEGI? Yeah, that's just a giant system for trigger warnings in games. That type of thing happens all the time, and it's been happening for so long, but nobody bats an eye, because it really isn't that big of a deal what someone else wants to put in their work. Why should I care what someone else wants to put in their creation? Now, of course, I have the right to critique it and parody it and comment on it as much as I want, but as far as them putting content in their work, it's their creation. I don't really care. Them putting trigger warnings in their work doesn't hurt anybody. It sure as hell doesn't hurt me. The only time it would hurt somebody is when someone doesn't put a trigger warning in their work when it's perceived that they should, and as a result, people like boycott and harass and witch hunt the publisher or the creator of that. That's the problem with trigger warnings. That's the only problem I see anyway, and that's the thing that should be being argued against here, not just the existence of trigger warnings.
All of this has led me to believe that much of the left is no longer progressive, but regressive.
So up until now, you've been championing the argument that progressivism doesn't stand for free speech or free religion or freedom of the press or whatever else. But now you use a different word, regressive, to describe the same thing. So which is it? You can't use both words to describe the same thing because they are literal opposites. And just now, you said they're different. You said they're no longer progressive, they're regressive. You can't use them interchangeably and simultaneously say they're opposites. That doesn't make any sense.
This regressive ideology doesn't judge people as individuals, but as a collective.
Judging people as a collective, you don't do that at all. That's totally not what you're doing right now with progressivism and regressivism and the left in general.
That's not progressive, that's regressive. Today's progressivism has become a faux moral movement hurling charges of racism, bigotry, xenophobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, and a slew of other meaningless buzzwords at anyone they disagree with.
Again, while this point is pretty solid, the problem with it lies in the inconsistent definitions. You just said, that's not progressive, that's regressive, but then only a few seconds later you treat the two as if they're exact synonyms with the phrase, today's progressivism. By saying, that's not progressive, that's regressive, you're saying that they're opposites, or you're at least saying that they're completely different. You can't treat the two as exact synonyms while also treating them as antonyms as they should be. You still have to leave room for the people that actually are progressive and do call themselves progressive.
The battle of ideas has been replaced by a battle of feelings, and outrage has replaced honesty. Diversity reigns supreme as long as it's not that pesky diversity of thought.
Is it just me, or is this portion of the video so disorganized to the point where it's almost like a word cloud of every anti-leftist, anti-progressive/regressive out there? I mean, that might be just me, but it seems like this is just a product of the echo chamber that is PragerU, and Dave Rubin to a certain extent.
Diversity reigns supreme as long as it's not that pesky diversity of thought.
Diversity of thought? Oh yeah, kind of like the diversity of thought within the incredibly large and diverse group of people on the left.
This isn't the recipe for a free society, it's a recipe for authoritarianism.
I don't think regressives have ever claimed to want a free society in the same way that we do. They want safe spaces and they want a society that caters to them, even if it means throwing away the fundamental principles that let their society exist in the first place. But what they think of as a free society is completely different from what we think of as a free society. It's completely pointless to argue that, oh, X, Y, and Z don't lead to a free society, A, B, and C do, because what you define as a free society is completely different from what they do. Your debate isn't really going anywhere. If you're arguing with different terms, it's just an endless cycle. You're not actually accomplishing anything.
For these reasons, I can no longer call myself a progressive. I don't really call myself a Democrat either.
Let me just address this part first. Democrat is a political party affiliation. It isn't something you call yourself just because. It isn't a description of your political ideologies like progressive or liberal or conservative are, and even then those are pretty loose descriptions. Either you're a Democrat or you're not. It's literally what you're registered as. It's not like progressive where you slowly have less and less in common with that group to identify with that label. It's a completely binary position. Either you are or you aren't. There's no in between. As for no longer identifying as a progressive, that doesn't make much sense either. Abandoning the label of progressive only reinforces the very issue you're complaining about. If you're going to complain that progressivism has been overrun with regressives, you should at least understand that your mindset is what causes it to happen in the first place.
For these reasons, I can no longer call myself a progressive.
You're saying that these reasons are why you don't identify as a progressive anymore. But the title of the video says why I left the left, not why I left progressivism. These are two separate things. You can't treat the left and progressivism as if they're the same entity. I mean, of course you can't treat either of them like they're monolithic entities to begin with, but someone on the left can still be a part of the left without being a progressive or calling themselves a progressive. Obviously, Why I Left the Left is a way catchier and more interesting title, but I think we can all agree that everyone should favor accuracy over aesthetics.
So if you think people should be able to say what they think without being punished for it, that people should be judged by their behavior, not their skin color,
or a vague political label they put on themselves,
and that people should be able to live the way that they want to live without government interference, then there's not much left on the left for you.
So with this statement, you're essentially telling people that if they are against regressivism, that they should quote-unquote leave the left. First of all, I already mentioned why that's totally counterproductive. It completely reinforces the idea you're complaining about. Secondly, and most importantly, it's just stupid to get caught up in all these labels. It's absolutely pointless. It doesn't help accomplish anything. It doesn't help anyone understand your political positions better. And unless your political beliefs have actually changed, or the entire political spectrum is rapidly changing, hint hint, it's not, it's completely ass backwards to identify with an entirely different political movement just because you don't like a select group of people who share the same label as you. If your political beliefs aren't being changed, then you're still where you were originally politically, not farther to the right. Didn't you say it was regressive to judge people as a collective? That's what you're doing here. You're judging the entire left as a collective, as a monolithic entity. All you're doing here is reinforcing the idea that all liberals or leftists or libtards or leftards, whatever dumb overused label you want to use, that they're all regressive, that they all argue with feelings, that they don't like facts, that the right is the way to go, we argue with facts and not feelings. You know, I think it's time we got rid of that tired old adage. It's inaccurate, it doesn't consider everyone's opinions, it's destructive, it's just stupid. Being anti-regressive is not a conservative idea, it's just called being sane. So I think that's all I have to say about this PragerU video. I know it's pretty old, like 2 or 3 months old, which is like, 3 years in PragerU shitposting years, but ever since it was uploaded, I want to make a response to it, so hopefully you'll forgive my procrastination with this channel. This is my first video, so tell me what you think of it. If you liked it, maybe leave a like, share it, comment, maybe let me know what video I should make a response to next, or not necessarily video, could be anything, really. Yeah, see you guys in the next video.